Been with the Wyoming Game and Fish for 26 years. He's a fishery research manager responsible for 4 statewide fishery crews, and those are the aquatic habitat, reservoir research, fish population, biostatistics, and the limnology laboratory. His education, in 1963, he got a BS degree in fisheries from Humboldt State University. I had a friend from Humboldt State. I didn't know you were from there. About the same time.
You had a friend? What happened to him?
Well, he's still my friend, but he, we don't.
That's good.
He's at Utah State now, and I'm here.
Oh.
In 1969, he got an MS degree in zoology from the University of Wyoming with a fisheries option, and he says his other interests are telling stories.
That's not what that says.
That's not what it says. But we're glad to welcome him here. His topic today is riparian or streamside habitat fisheries concerns. So, Bob, it's all yours. Thank you for coming.
Well, thank you. It's going to be kind of a new experience for me, hiding behind this little, whatever this podium is here, and being on that TV. If I look at myself, that'll be it, boy. So we'll talk a little bit about riparian, and then I've got some slides to show as well. Riparian, to a lot of people, maybe not to you folks, is sort of a buzzword and nobody knows what it means. It's a lot like artesians were a number of years ago. And since I'm from California, I've been to Artesia, California. I've seen a lot of artesians, but I don't know if I've seen a riparian or not. So if somebody can fix this room so we can make the slides go, then we'll get into the rest of it. And I'll try to tell you why we're interested in riparian habitat and fisheries in Wyoming, and don't worry about the first blank one. A lot of people would say, well, that's my data. Okay, here we go. Well, where is the first one? What'd you do with it? Hey, this is my very favorite slide. It doesn't have a whole lot to do with riparian ecosystems, but it is important. And that's because I always like to refer to these folks as the first ones that were interested in fisheries in this part of the country. That particular photo was taken in 1870, and it's at a ranch at the head of Henry's Lake in Idaho. A couple of guys by the name of Sawtell and Wirtz decided they were going to go there and raise some livestock. They soon found the folly of that idea because they had a lot of boggy ground, and they found the horseflies and whatever else drove them right out of business. So they became interested in fish. They've harvested fish from Henry's Lake, fish like that, and hauled them. You've got to remember, this is in the days before refrigeration and that sort of thing. They hauled them 50 miles to Virginia City, to the mining camps, and sold them there at the profit. So they went right into the fishery business. So what does all this mean to riparian? Well, what it means is that we need to have, everybody, not just me in the Game and Fish Department, ought to have streams that are in good condition. And what does that mean? That means good bank vegetation like that shows. That's a picture taken in 1905 on Douglas Creek in the Placer area. Riparian vegetation is that stuff you see along the stream bank there. It goes back a ways until you get up on the slopes of the hillside there, and it isn't influenced by a great deal of water anymore. Streams then needed to be in good shape. They still need to be in good shape today. Why? To harbor fish, and fish in this instance, in the riparian sense, are somewhat like a miner's canary. If you don't have fish in the stream, in this case I suppose we ought to talk about trout a little bit. If there aren't fish in the stream, you can generally figure there must be something wrong with it and go and investigate and find out why that is. You need a healthy riparian system. Here's a natural unaltered stream channel, an artist's conception of it, of course. They're typified, like those 2 slides showed a minute ago, by a lot of bank vegetation. They've got a channel shaped similar to that, harbors a lot of fish, some undercut banks, and that sort of thing. As I said, harbors a lot of fish, 470 fish per mile in a case like this, and as you can see, there's a lot of grass, a lot of other aquatic vegetation along the banks of that stream. Where's that stream happens to be in Utah. I'll show you some Wyoming streams. Don't be scared. Since you have a friend in Utah, that's why I showed that stream. Thank you. A healthy riparian ecosystem, or a system, I don't want to say ecosystem, too many people say that. A healthy system filters sediment. It stabilizes the stream banks through the root system. It stores and releases water. For example, when lands are irrigated, the vegetation stores the water and releases it later in the year. And it recharges aquifers. Water percolates down into the soils and through the strait and into the aquifers and is stored there. This is a picture for Dr. Hassfurther of a local stream right there, a healthy one at that. That's the Little Laramie River right out here about 20 miles or so west of town. That's on Mike McGill's ranch. And you can see then that that system is really healthy. Lots of stream bank vegetation, not a lot of sediment in the stream, a lot of good forage for animals of all kinds. Also a lot of good forage if you like to fish. Okay, there's the characteristics of a healthy riparian system. It's got a high water table, as you could see before by all the vegetation that was supported there. Has increased storage capacity over what there'd be if there were no vegetation there. Has high forage production, forage for wildlife, forage for livestock. Good shade, you could see the shade in the stream a little bit before that. Good water quality, high wildlife habitat diversity, good vegetation system, and most important of all, I think, for binding the banks of a stream is a good root system. And move on here, and hopefully I won't forget what I just thought of. I'll get a bad grade if I do, I suppose. Here's a channelized section of a stream, kind of an artist drawing of same. Notice that it's got a kind of a dish-shaped form. The bank vegetation isn't too good. It's not very prolific. The root system's not very good. And there's few fish in a stream like that, far different from what we saw before. Now, I want to emphasize the shape of that channel because when I get to the end of the slides here, it's going to be kind of a quiz, and I'll ask you some questions about that. I guess then I'm fair game for questions from you, if I ask you some. All right, there's a channelized section of a stream or otherwise damaged. As I told you, it doesn't hold many fish. A stream that looks like that. Notice how flat that is. It doesn't have the kind of the U-shaped, bowl-shaped channel. Notice the sediment that you can see in there. The banks are sort of caving in as well. But you can see the typical S-shaped pattern, a meander that a stream takes as it moves down its drainage towards either another river or the ocean. Now, if you, all streams do that regardless of where they are. If we had a hose in here today and that stairway there was a cement ramp and we could turn that on, turn the water on and let it run down that concrete ramp, it wouldn't run down in a straight line. It would meander and bend down through there. That's the way water runs to dissipate energy. And it'll do that. And when we get in trouble, man gets in trouble when we try to straighten a stream course or otherwise make it convey water better. Can't do that. Can't fool around with Mother Nature and get away with it very often. Okay, we'll move ahead. An unhealthy riparian ecosystem, or a riparian streamside system, is characterized by a low water table, decreased storage capacity in the soils, low forage production for any animals, livestock included, little shade, got warm water, poor fish habitat, not very good water quality, low habitat diversity for wildlife, low habitat diversity for anything really, poor vegetation and not very good root systems. So some streams like that are going to erode pretty rapidly and you get into trouble. The meandering stream is in a balance as it moves down the country. We upset that balance one way or another. Too much water, too little water, straighten an oxbow, cut off a meander, do any of those kind of things, and we ask for disasters like that. That's a little stream, that's Squaw Creek. I think Vic's writing all these stream names down. He's going to go there and see if it really looks like that. And then he'd come back and get me if it isn't. That's Squaw Creek over at Lander, and you can see that's in pretty tough shape. System's way out of balance. It wants to cut all those meanders off. Somebody straightened it or did something else with it up or downstream from where that shot's taken. It looks better on the TV than it does on the screen. That's good. All right. Doesn't make a lot of difference how the stream got that way. There's lots of ways to do it. We can do it with a bulldozer or with a steam shovel like shows there. That particular set of pictures was taken over on the Hams Fork River a number of years ago. The Union Pacific Railroad decided the river was going to take their tracks out, so they were going to take the river out instead, and that's how they did it. And they produced this sort of a thing, shoved the riparian vegetation in the bank off into the stream, changed the channel, and ended up with something that looks like that. That looked very good to you fisher types out there? Not very. That thing is not very deep. There's no undercut banks. The banks aren't very stable, and it's going to do a little washing away when the big runoff comes. It might indicate, too, that there aren't any laws in our state that recognize the integrity of a stream channel. So the protection that stream channels really have is for people learning how to work with them. And there are some federal laws, but nobody in Wyoming likes anything to do with the federal government. And that's the 404 permit system, where if you're going to make some channel changes or do work in streams, you really need to fill out a 404 permit and get the Corps of Engineers permission to do that. Lots of things are exempted from permits. That sort of thing wasn't. They just did that. Anyhow, we'll move on here. The hooves of a lot of cattle on a stream bank at the wrong time of year, like in the early spring when the banks are soft, can be about as effective in fouling up a stream as the blade of a bulldozer. As I said, if they're on the stream at the wrong time of year. Okay? Also, streams kept low for one reason or another. Perhaps all the water is diverted out, or much of it's diverted out for a long period during the year, will cause a riparian system to be not very well developed, like that shows. And since we're into stream names today, that's Ten Sleep Creek. Write that down. Oh, were you? Did it look like that? Yeah. Thank you. Now they know I'm not fooling. Okay. I also have various kinds of effluents that don't do the stream much of any good, and they can be harmful to the stream bank system as well, particularly if they kill the vegetation. Or once again, we man can get in the act and do bad things. Now, let's see, if I use this pointer over here, I guess that's what that's for, unless I just kind of swing it around and bash Vic with it. Okay, this is a salt river. This gentleman here who owns this portion of land was concerned because the river wanted to keep eating out his field here, and he was losing a little acreage now and again. So he thought the thing to do would be to go over here, cut this meander off, and straighten that right out. So, but what he did by doing that is cause an increase in velocity here, and now he's got a sensitive point right there, and that thing is going to start eating away, and he'll cause worse problems. Now you can see, if you look at the good things in that slide, whatever they might be, you can see over the years this thing has had an S-shaped pattern down through here, and it's changed across the years. But we people being what we are, we like to have things just the way we want them all the time, and we don't want to lose land, so we end up cutting oxbows off and meanders like that. That's not the thing to do. There's better ways to manage a stream than what that is. And the Salt River drainage is, Vic would tell you, has got a lot more problems than just people fooling around with the river channel. But that's beyond what I wanted to say here today. Okay, we'll move along a little bit. Once again, I want you to remember that those streams and systems are in some kind of a dynamic equilibrium. We foul that up, we ask for trouble. Why are we interested we the Game and Fish Department, interested in this kind of thing? Well, because fish live in streams, and we're charged with providing good fishing for the public. Can't do that if the streams aren't in very good shape. Also, try to help out landowners when we can, and other agencies, to keep their streams healthy. And we've got one statewide crew in the fish division that works with stream habitat all the time. It's only 3 people, and they have a statewide responsibility, and so their time becomes limited. We do have 8 fish management crews, though, that work Locally in the state, there's one here and several others scattered around the state, and they're really the first network that people can call to find out, gee, what's wrong with my stream, why is it eroding, and so forth. This slide is put in here just to show you how long a problem can last. That was adapted from some work that was done in Wisconsin, and after the stream was channeled and the vegetation taken out, the fishery population remained low for better than 80 years after that. If the problem was fixed right, it would have come back in relatively short order. Okay, there's the characteristics once again of an unhealthy riparian. Have a nice lunch if you're leaving, will you? Okay, we have a low water table, decreased storage capacity, low forage production, 4 game animals and 4 livestock, poor fish habitat, poor water quality, low wildlife habitat, and little vegetation and a poor root system. Now I think we're going to look at some situations where we tried to take care of some things. This is Squaw Creek over at Lander again, a small stream as you can see, and at this part of it's upstream from where that bad damage that I showed you before was. At any rate, you can see that the left bank, I'll call it, the one towards the back of the slide then, has begun to cave off and is in danger of washing out. Well, what one of our folks recommended to do was place a little bit of rock at the toe of that thing and then reseed with some grasses and plant some willows in there, and this is what it looks like 4 years later. Fish population increased in there, the banks are now relatively stable, and there's no or little danger of that system falling off in there and creating worse problems. This is another stream, it's right close to town. That one's in good shape, and it's on the land of a man who runs a good deal of livestock, but he manages his lands very, very well. Once again, that's the Little Laramie River, one of my favorite places to fish, and that's Mike McGill's land. You could guess, I suppose, from that particular picture that, gee whiz, where's the stock? I don't see any stock along that stream. He must not run very many. Well, this next picture is important because, as you can see, he's got a field right up next to the stream. But that's significant in that he's got a fence that runs along that stream bank, manages his stock away from the stream bank. He has water gaps placed variously along that stream so his livestock can get to water. But his system remains very, very healthy. The land immediately upstream for this particular gentleman has had some channeling work done to it, but I don't have any pictures of that. So the system here is in really good shape. Lots of fish, about 280 pounds of fish per mile of stream in there. Okay, we'll move along. Sometimes when Quentin Skinner and I are around to talk about riparian kinds of things, he likes to show historical things, and it's often, now he doesn't do this, but oftentimes people will indicate, gee, it was 100 years ago, things were in a lot better shape than they are today. Well, sometimes that's true and sometimes it's not. And that's why I put these in here to try to indicate the changes that can happen across years. That's the Blacks Fork River, about 10 miles, what would it be, north of Interstate 80, out around Church Buttes. That picture was taken September 10th, 1870. It was part of the Hayden Survey Party. One of my favorite pictures. Went back in there and stumbled around this year in June 1989, and that's what that same place looks like today. As you saw in the picture before that, grass was really pretty good. Today you can see this channel has changed in the last 119 years, or whatever the right math is for that. It meandered around in there a little bit, then the channel filled in and that sort of thing. There's more sagebrush there today than there was in 1870, and there's fewer cottonwoods. If you walk around on that floodplain there, you come across some stumps and some places where it looks like the cottonwood trees have fallen over and the hole's still in the ground, the bark's all and the wood's all rotted away. What were the changes in this stream between 1870 and, according to the records that I've read, there weren't an awful lot of ranchers in that particular part of the country in 1870. The changes between now and today, or I mean then and today, relative to the Blacks Fork River is that now it's got a dam on it, Meeks Cabin Reservoir, so the flow's regulated. Other than that, can't see a whole lot of difference in the country. It changed for some reason. Next, this stream's not very far from here. It's only about 20 miles to the east. That's Dale Creek. And that picture was taken in 1868. That's when the Dale Creek trestle was built. And as you can see, they did a lot of heavy work down in the stream bottom there. Pretty well tore up the willows and the grasses, and they're all gone. So I stumbled back there in June of 1989. That's what it looks like today. Looks a lot better than it did then. You can still see the foundation of where the trestle was and the abutments and that sort of thing. It was interesting. I was in there the day before I took this picture, and there were no cattle there. I came back the next day, and they'd put cattle in there, just for me, I guess. Anyway, the stream's in good condition. The vegetation's nice. Lots of nice grass in there. Another picture of Dale Creek. That one was taken in 1917. The key thing to look at that in that picture is the vegetation that's along the stream, because as you can see, there isn't very much, not very many willows. The same spotted right close to it in June 1989. Lots of grass, lots of willows along the stream, and by the way, there are fish in that stream. Not a lot, but there are some. This is an important one. This was taken this summer when I went up to, where did I go? I went to Jackson, I guess. This is on the Green River at the Warren Bridge fishing easement. The important thing to look at in this slide, I told you it was a public fishing area, I guess. There's a fence runs down here. It fences off the public fishing area. And then you can see this part up here, and those two black dots there. I don't want to call them culprits, but what they are is cattle. And they're not, they don't have access to below that fence. And so you can see that then the willows and the grasses right up next to the stream are in pretty good shape. Now I just turned to take the next shot, just turned and looked straight downstream. I better check, see if that stream's going to run down before I say I did take it downstream. Anyway, that's what it looks like there. See the vegetation is healthy, that sort of thing. You can accomplish the same thing by different systems of grazing management, or different systems, as I showed you on the Hams Fork, of bulldozer management. Anyway, quite a difference in those particular stream reaches there. So once again, we return to a healthy riparian system, healthy stream banks. Got a high water table. If you remember that slide just before that, the place where all the willows are and the grass, the water table is pretty good in there, and it stores water in the banks. Lots of forage production, shade, good cool water, lots of fish, good fish habitat, high wildlife and habitat diversity, good vegetation and roots, and good forage for livestock if they can come in seasonally. Okay, now here's the part where we get a little quiz. So, if there's fishermen in the group, I assume, where would you fish if you wanted to fish that? Is that a healthy system? Somebody better say it is, because it is. If you're going to fish, you better fish right in there. Big cut bank under there. Lots of brown trout. Note the clean gravel, the vegetation, that sort of thing's filtered, silt out, and like that. I'll keep this thing with me, and so when they show this tape, they'll think some old weird guy was here, had to have a cane. Okay, now, see anything wrong with this particular stream here? Anything wrong with that? Okay, there is something wrong with it. This is the Little Laramie River. Again, this part of the stream was channeled, about 125 yards of that. Notice it's all the same depth across there. Nice bend. Moved the stream over about 40 feet because the gentleman wanted to get water to that head gate. He thought he was going to lose the channel. Well, he didn't. It has come back in. That was all raw dirt once along the bank towards the right of the picture. The reason it looks as good as it does, I think, today is because there was no runoff, or essentially none this year. Now, this next slide, the next and the last slide, is the same river, the same day, the same flow, but it looks a great deal different, and it's only I don't know, 100 yards away from where this is, Little Laramie River again. That's what it looks like after man got done fooling around with it. This is what it really ought to look like. Same water volume and same everything, except you have a deeper channel there, you get some overhanging vegetation, and you've got some pockets, and that's what a real stream should look like. Okay, what does the Wyoming Game and Fish Department do in all of this kind of thing, and how do we work with people? Well, like I said a minute ago, we've got one crew across the state, the Fish Division does, that deals with aquatic habitat. We have 8 fish management crews that can also help out. We have another division, Habitat and Tech Services Division. They have about 15 extension habitat specialists across the state. Their primary duties, though, are with the terrestrial habitat, dirt. They don't deal with water very much. And then we have the game division that also does some habitat work. It's important that all of those interests work together in this time, particularly at this time, because there's a whole lot of interest in riparian areas and trying to keep stream banks healthy. There's more opportunity for us Game and Fish Department, to help people and provide them advice, and we've got people to do that. Fish Division, once again, the division that I work for, has developed some guidelines that we hope will provide some protection or some help to folks when they have problems along their streams, or other agencies as well. We have printed guidelines that are available on request relative to timber sales. We recommend buffer zones along stream channels of varying width so that the banks are protected. There's also guidelines available relative to all other forest kinds of activities, such as cutting, slash removal, road building, and the like. Guidelines pertaining to highway projects, bridge placements or bridge repair, vegetation control projects, for example, spray projects. Always recommend buffer strips along areas where there's going to be some spraying done. Burn projects, buffer strips once again. We've got some guidelines for grazing allotment management. There's oil and gas field development guidelines. There's guidelines relative to irrigation diversions, and there's guidelines about desert land entries as well. All of these things have to do with the aquatic system, and all of these things have to do with trying to keep it healthy. And what I think we as a people need to do is educate one another and help each other out relative to keeping the stream bank systems healthy, so that we don't have a Squaw Creek or a Salt River kind of a system develop where things really get out of control and then everybody has problems. And so with that, I'll offer to talk to you about anything you want to about riparian systems or fisheries, or even all those pictures I showed you. Now it's just your turn to quiz me, I guess. Yes, sir?
Question of the Salt River Road. Where along the river is that?
Right in the middle of Star Valley, around Afton.
Right in Afton?
Mm-hmm. And what I was going to say earlier, and it's too bad Vic's gone, is that the other change that's happened along the Salt River is that it went from a flood irrigation system, which means water diverted out of the stream and flooded over to land, to one of sprinkler irrigation. And maybe you guys already all know that, but there appears to be some correlation there with the increased flows in the salt to go into sprinkler irrigation, and there's less bank storage. Okay. Somebody else? Yes, sir.
When you have the livestock damage along the riparian zone, if the livestock continues to populate that area, does that damage propagate itself up and down the stream, or is it only localized right where the livestock utilize it?
It depends on how big the area is. I think largely the damage might, I'll see, get rid of my slide there. Excuse me. Anyway, it's likely largely localized to a particular land. If it's really severe, then it can cause other changes downstream. But generally I don't think it's that severe. And it doesn't need to be severe at all if there's the right management system put to work. The unfortunate part about not livestock, before the range man comes over here and throttles me for talking about livestock too much. The unfortunate part about historical kinds of things is that there's a tendency for people to think, well, gee, that stream's looked that way for 20 years, it must have looked that way forever. And that's why I put those historical kinds of things in there to show that that's not really true. Ah, the range person.
Not going to hash on you. You've mentioned Quentin
Why?
a couple times. One of his favorite theories is use of cattle to rehabilitate riparian zones after a channel has undergone head-cutting degradation, to knock down the high walls, spread the stream out, and then allow it to come back in naturally. Do you think that's a viable alternative, or do you think Quentin's blowing smoke again?
Where's Quentin? Boy, what an opportunity. Yeah, I know that. No, I suspect that's probably right in some degree. But what the key is, what's the right level of management to get the cattle to do that? And then once the banks have sort of been contoured, which is what you want to get back to, not the SCS, Soil Conservation Service contour necessarily, that's then gravelled and rocked and it looks like a canal, but one where the bank slopes gradually. The key then is to manage the livestock so that the willows and the grasses come back in, and not like we saw in one of those earlier slides where you still get the cattle there and they're bashing the banks down all right, but they keep right on bashing them down like the bulldozer did. So sure, that kind of management is going to go on over on Muddy Creek on their study area. So sure, it's already working over there. Somebody else want to? Yes, sir.
How much consideration does the Corps give to riparian zones in their issuing of 404 permits?
More now than they used to do. The Corps of Engineers has got an overall management plan that does include, well, best word to say is multiple use. So it's pretty good, really. The thing that's nice to do relative to any kind of Corps of Engineer work or any stream channel work at all is to get an engineer and a fishery biologist to talk together. And the reason I say that is that on the Green River and the Seatskiddy Wildlife Refuge, there was an area there, well, as many people know, it used to be a ranch in that area. The government bought it, turned it into a refuge. Well, the former owner of the land had placed along about, a quarter or maybe a half a mile of stream in one particular bend. He put a lot of car bodies in there. Well, car bodies don't look very natural. And so the Fish and Wildlife Service determined that the car bodies should be removed and the bank protected. Well, they did that all right. The car bodies worked good. They protect the bank. They also provided some big, rough fish, not coarse fish, but big, rough contour fish habitat in there. And what was done is that the reclamation project, the stream project, was planned by your friendly engineer who used relatively small and uniform sized gravel, contoured the bank, and made it like an irrigation canal. Water flows through there nice, but there's no rough spots, there's no eddies, and as a result of that, there's less fish habitat. And what Dr. Benz, Al Benz, our habitat man, recommended was the same thing. A little more of a slope, but bigger rock in there. Then you get eddies and that sort of thing. Real way to do that is not to take as Quentin always is fond of saying, not to take the elasticity out of the system, which is what really happened when you line anything with rock. It isn't going to wander off in the country. But that's what I meant about engineers and fish folks talking together. There's lots of ways to build a bridge. Somebody else? I'm going to get off cheap. Ooh, another one.
Another one of Quentin's favorite projects is using beaver to help raise the channel bottom and things like that, spread water. Has Game and Fish been doing any of that in other areas to improve fish habitat?
Boy, there's a long answer to that question. As Bill Platts is a Forest Service fishery man who's done a lot of work with grazing systems and beavers over the year. he says there's good beaver and bad beaver. A good beaver is one that will provide some good habitat, say in a mountain stream, also raises the water table, makes a wet meadow, and does all that kind of thing. Okay, now, Luna Leopold, who is what is he? He's a son of Alto Leopold, so it makes him great right away. No, that's not true. He's a hydrologist and an engineer sort of a person, and what he says is that streams don't naturally build grade controls, meaning when you're doing some stream improvement work, don't put a log across the stream and expect it to dig a hole, all right? Now, a beaver dam. Nature's engineer builds grade controls by building dams across streams, and this would be an instance of bad beaver. The tendency for any kind of an obstruction in a stream, and sometimes beaver dams as well, build them across the stream, and there's a good one right out here on Clark Street. There's a great big one now. But notice what happens at a high water. The dam will either breach in the middle or it'll wash around the end and create a new channel. And that's when the beaver isn't very good, because it'll cause more erosion than he solves. So beaver are good in some instances and beaver aren't so good in other instances, and so you can't hang a tag on a beaver that says I'm good all the time. Sometimes he's good and sometimes he's not so good. In a place like Muddy Creek, where Quentin's working, and upstream from there, beaver do a lot of good because they'd raise a water table.
You showed a graph earlier about how quickly the degradation takes place when things get changed. Can you give us some kind of idea of the time it takes to repair itself once you've allowed it to do so?
Yeah, a good example of that would be that Squaw Creek situation. In 4 years, it went from a slumping bank, like I showed, to one that was nicely vegetated and lots of willows going in there. So it can be as soon as for example, 4 seasons, or it can be as long as there are instances, and Bill Platts needs to be here. In some of his work in Nevada, he's noticed that where streams have down cut and head cut over a long period of time, and everything has been taken off, meaning livestock and people use and everything. 30 years later, they look the same way, and that's because there was so much damage there that there really isn't anything you can do with that outside of going in and trying to engineer it back up. And that's hard to do artificially. So it can be a very short time or a very long time, depending on the system. The Little Laramie River out here, like I showed you, that's 2 years' time, and that channel looks pretty good. Needs to be tested with a high water year to see what happens on Mike's property there, see if it tries to go back where it was before, and he won't like that then. He told us after he did that work, he said, well, I hired my neighbor and he brought his cat over, and I didn't think he was going to do what he did. It was too late then.
What do you expect that channel to do when the high flow does come busting through there?
We should probably ask Dick that. I would expect, having looked at it, expect it to try to go back in behind where that big grassy bank was and try to run down its former channel, go around the edge some way. Might not do that if we get several years of reasonably low runoff, but if we get a big water year, that's going to zoom in there and overtop his bank and do lots of things he doesn't want it to do. Is that right, sir?
Probably, yeah. Is he above or below the Bellamy Canal?
Where's the Bellamy Canal?
It's on a Little Laramie up near that region. You know where that public fishing area is?
Yeah.
It's just right near V-Bar, right in there.
Well, he's below that.
Because they can take a lot of water through that.
Yeah, he's below that. You'll pass that place where that channeling work was done if you drove across towards the Joe Miller Company headquarters. You're right by that then. He's just upstream from Forbes's, and that's where that channel was. It is.
The reason I ask is that I was a former water commissioner on the Little Laramie with Pond Bottom, and we tried to keep people from doing stuff like that.
Yeah,
They want water desperately.
that's right. There's good ways to get water and ways not to get it. In today's economy, people like to get their water and maintain their head gates as cheaply as possible, and I don't blame them. And sometimes the cheap method, the inexpensive method, will turn into an expensive one in the long run. Anybody else? Before I rip my microphone off and streak out the door. Gee, good, I can get away then.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.